Have you ever seen someone laugh so hard at another person's misery that they never noticed they were laughing at the man who would one day own everything they had? That was exactly what happened inside the tallest office building in New York. One ordinary Monday morning, hundreds of employees stood in the lobby, not because of an emergency, but because someone had decided to turn a man's humiliation into entertainment. A middle-aged janitor knelt on the cold marble floor. His uniform was soaked. His hands trembled as he wiped coffee from the expensive white tiles. Above him stood a woman in a designer suit worth more than his monthly salary. She smiled, then deliberately poured another cup of hot coffee onto the floor. The entire lobby exploded with laughter. Someone even started recording on their phone. The woman looked down at the janitor and said, "Clean it faster. You people are only useful when you're on your knees." More laughter echoed through the building. The janitor never looked up. He quietly continued cleaning. Nobody knew that within 72 hours, every single person laughing would be standing on that same floor, begging him not to destroy their lives. And the woman who humiliated him? She would lose everything she had ever loved. His name was Ethan Carter, 42 years old, a quiet man, always polite, always smiling. He had worked as the building's janitor for almost 6 years. Every morning he arrived before sunrise. While executives slept in luxury apartments, Ethan was already polishing their offices. When employees entered, everything sparkled. Nobody thanked him. Nobody even noticed him. To them, he wasn't Ethan. He was just the janitor. Some people couldn't even remember his face. Others remembered it only because they enjoyed making fun of him. His shoes had holes. His uniform was faded. His lunch was usually just a peanut butter sandwich packed in an old paper bag. Yet, every day, he greeted everyone with the same words. "Good morning." Most ignored him. Some rolled their eyes. Others laughed. But Ethan never stopped smiling. Not because life was easy, but because he believed bitterness only made suffering heavier. A secret no one knew. Every Friday afternoon, instead of going home, Ethan stopped at a small bakery. He bought fresh bread, cookies, milk, sometimes chocolate for the children. The cashier once smiled and asked, "Grandkids?" Ethan simply smiled back, "No." Then he carried the bags to an old neighborhood shelter where homeless families lived. Children ran toward him the moment they saw him. "Mr. Ethan." They hugged him before he even opened the bags. One little girl always asked the same question. "Did you bring the strawberry cookies?" Every single week, he had. The shelter manager once asked him, "You barely make enough money yourself. Why do you keep giving everything away?" Ethan looked toward the children, then quietly replied, "Because someone once saved me when I had nothing. But I never got the chance to thank him. If I can't repay him, I'll repay the world." Back at the office. Unfortunately, kindness meant nothing inside Harrison Global Corporation, especially to Jessica Harrison, the CEO's daughter. 31 years old, beautiful, brilliant, and unbelievably cruel. She believed success made people valuable, and poverty made them disposable. Whenever she saw Ethan, she found a new way to humiliate him. One day she dropped her expensive pen. Instead of picking it up, she snapped her fingers. "You." Ethan looked around. She pointed directly at him. "Yes. You. Pick it up." He quietly picked up the pen. She didn't even say, "Thank you." Instead, she grabbed a tissue and wiped the place where his fingers had touched it. The executives nearby laughed. One whispered, "She treats him like he's contagious." Jessica smiled proudly. "People should know their place." Ethan said nothing. He simply returned to work. Not everyone inside the company was heartless. An elderly security guard named Frank often talked with Ethan during lunch. Frank once asked, "Why don't you ever defend yourself? They insult you every day. They treat you worse than garbage." Ethan smiled, then answered with something Frank would never forget. "When someone throws mud at you, you don't win by throwing it back. You win by reaching a place where their mud can't touch you anymore." Frank laughed. "You're too good for this place." Ethan looked around the massive glass building, then quietly replied, "Maybe. But life has a strange way of surprising people." A week later, Jessica had an idea. She wanted entertainment. She called every department manager into the lobby. Employees gathered around. Phones appeared. Everyone sensed something embarrassing was about to happen. Jessica carried a tray filled with expensive coffee. She walked toward Ethan. He was mopping the floor near the reception desk. Without warning, she accidentally bumped into him. The tray flipped. Coffee splashed across her white designer suit. The entire lobby went silent. Jessica stared at her ruined clothes, then slowly turned toward Ethan, her face filled with fake shock. "Look what you've done." Ethan froze. I didn't touch you." Jessica's voice became louder. "So now you're calling me a liar? I watched you ruin this suit. It's worth more than you'll earn this entire year." Everyone looked at Ethan. Nobody spoke. Not one person defended him, because standing against Jessica could end a career. Jessica pointed toward the coffee on the floor. "Kneel." Ethan looked confused. "What?" "I said kneel. And clean every drop. With your hands." The lobby became completely silent. Even Frank looked terrified. Ethan slowly knelt. He began wiping the coffee using paper towels. The next morning, the video was everywhere. Employees had shared it in private group chats. Some laughed. Some added jokes. One caption read, "The world's most obedient janitor." Another, "Imagine being this pathetic." By the time Ethan arrived at work, almost everyone had already seen the video. People whispered as he walked past. Some intentionally played the video on their phones just loud enough for him to hear. Others laughed without saying a word. Ethan simply nodded politely and continued pushing his cleaning cart. Not a single complaint. Not a single excuse. But something had changed. Frank, the old security guard, noticed it immediately. Ethan's smile was gone. Later that afternoon, the receptionist called him. "Ethan, someone left this for you." It wasn't a package, just a thick ivory envelope. No return address. Only 3 words. For Ethan Carter. His hands froze. He recognized the handwriting instantly. It was impossible, because the man who wrote those letters had disappeared more than 20 years ago. His grandfather. The only family Ethan had ever loved. The man everyone believed had died, without leaving anything behind. Inside the envelope was a single key, an address, and one handwritten sentence. "It's finally time to come home." Ethan stared at those words for several seconds. 25 years earlier, the Carter family had been one of the richest families in America. Their shipping company owned ports, cargo fleets, hotels, technology firms, and investments across the world. People called Ethan's grandfather the Silent King, not because he spoke loudly, but because every decision he made changed entire industries. Then, everything disappeared overnight. The newspapers called it bankruptcy. The media called it bad investments. Competitors celebrated. Friends vanished. Even relatives abandoned the family. But the truth was much darker. Ethan's grandfather had discovered that several business partners, including Richard Harrison, Jessica's father, had secretly stolen billions from the company. They forged signatures, moved money offshore, manipulated stock prices, then blamed everything on the old man. By the time investigators arrived, the evidence had already been erased. Richard Harrison walked away richer than ever. The Carter family lost everything. Or, at least, that's what everyone believed. His breathing became heavier. Memories he had buried for decades suddenly came rushing back. That evening, Ethan drove to the address written on the letter. The road became quieter. Trees lined both sides. Eventually, he reached massive iron gates, covered in rust. Behind them stood an enormous mansion. Old, silent, almost forgotten by time. Ethan stepped out of his car. His heart raced. As he placed the key into the lock, the gates slowly opened by themselves. Inside, the mansion looked untouched. Dust covered everything. Family portraits still hung on the walls. He walked through the hallway until he reached the library. There, waiting beside the fireplace, sat an elderly man in a tailored black suit. "Ethan?" The man smiled. "I've been waiting for you." Ethan stopped. His voice trembled. "Who are you?" "My name is Arthur Bennett. I worked for your grandfather for 40 years. I made him a promise. I told him I would protect what belonged to the Carter family until you were ready." Arthur walked toward one of the bookshelves. He pulled an old leather book. The entire wall slowly slid open. Behind it, a hidden elevator. Ethan stared in disbelief. They descended nearly 60 feet underground. The doors opened, not into a basement, but into one of the most advanced private offices Ethan had ever seen. Massive screens covered the walls. Financial charts, stock markets, international news. Dozens of employees stood working quietly. The moment Ethan entered, every single person stood up. No one spoke. Then, together, they bowed. Arthur smiled. "Welcome home, Mr. Carter." Ethan looked completely confused. "What is this place?" Arthur answered calmly. "For the last 20 years, we've been rebuilding everything that was stolen. We invested quietly, bought companies through anonymous firms, purchased land, technology, energy, shipping. No one knew who was behind it. And today," Arthur handed Ethan a thick folder, "you officially own Carter International Holdings." Ethan opened the file. His eyes widened. He looked at Arthur again. "There has to be a mistake." Arthur smiled softly. "There isn't." Arthur placed a tablet on the table. The screen displayed one number: $38,742,000,000. $38,742,000,000. Ethan blinked several times. He thought the screen was wrong. Arthur shook his head. "No, that's only your liquid assets. You also own ports, airlines, medical companies, artificial intelligence firms, and more than 300 subsidiaries." Ethan sat down, unable to speak. For 6 years, he had been cleaning office floors, while unknowingly becoming one of the wealthiest men in the world. Arthur continued. "Your grandfather wanted one thing, not revenge. Justice. He believed revenge destroys people, but justice restores balance." Then Arthur paused. "But I also know some people deserve to face the consequences of their own choices." Back at Harrison Global, Jessica celebrated. She proudly showed the viral video to her friends. Everyone laughed. Her father, Richard Harrison, entered the room. He watched the video. His smile disappeared. "Where did you record this?" Jessica shrugged. "Our janitor." Richard looked closer. He leaned toward the screen. His face slowly turned pale. "No, it can't be." Jessica frowned. "What?" Richard whispered almost to himself. "Those eyes. They're exactly like his grandfather's." For the first time in decades, Richard Harrison felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Fear. Arthur looked at Ethan. "There's one more thing." He pressed a button. One screen lit up. It displayed Harrison Global's financial records. Every debt, every weakness, every hidden lawsuit, every illegal transfer. Arthur smiled. "We've been watching them for 20 years. Ethan looked silently at the screen. He remembered the coffee, the insults, the laughter, the humiliation. Then he remembered something else. His grandfather's words. "Never destroy a person while they're weak. Wait until they believe they're untouchable." Jessica wasn't satisfied. She grabbed another cup from the receptionist. Then, right in front of hundreds of employees, she poured it directly onto the floor he had just cleaned. Laughter erupted. Someone shouted, "Make him clean faster." Another employee began filming. Jessica smiled into the camera. "This is what happens when incompetent people waste my time." She leaned close enough that only Ethan could hear. "You'll always be nothing. You were born at the bottom. And that's exactly where you'll die." Ethan finally looked into her eyes. For the first time, there was no smile on his face. Only silence. A silence so calm, it almost felt dangerous. Jessica mistook it for surrender. She smiled even wider. She had no idea that before the week was over, the woman who believed she owned the world would discover she didn't even own her own future. Ethan slowly stood. He straightened his jacket, looked directly at Arthur, and for the first time in the entire story, his voice carried absolute confidence. "Prepare the acquisition." Arthur smiled. "I already have." Outside the underground headquarters, dozens of executives received the same notification. Operation Phoenix has officially begun. Across the city, law firms, investment banks, private investigators, and financial analysts all began moving at the exact same moment. None of them worked for Harrison Global. Every single one worked for Ethan Carter. Meanwhile, Jessica was posting another joke about the worthless janitor. She had no idea that the man she had humiliated yesterday had just started the biggest corporate takeover in the company's history. The next morning, Harrison Global looked exactly as it always had. Employees rushed through the revolving doors with coffee in one hand and laptops in the other. Jessica arrived in her red sports car. She smiled as the valet opened the door. Everything felt normal. She had no idea it would be the last normal morning of her life. As she stepped into the lobby, she noticed something strange. Groups of people stood whispering. Executives who usually greeted her confidently looked nervous. The receptionist wasn't smiling. Even Frank, the old security guard, stood unusually straight, wearing his formal uniform. Jessica frowned. "What's going on?" Before anyone could answer, the elevator doors opened. 6 men in black suits walked out first. They weren't Harrison Global employees. Behind them came several lawyers carrying leather briefcases. Then came a woman holding a thick folder marked "Confidential. Ownership Transfer." The lobby fell silent. One executive whispered, "Is that the acquisition team?" Jessica laughed. "Relax. Whoever bought shares still has to answer to my father." She had barely finished speaking when the elevator opened one final time. A man stepped out. Perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit, polished black shoes, a silver watch, confident posture, calm expression. It took several seconds before anyone recognized him. The janitor, Ethan Carter. But he wasn't carrying a mop. He wasn't pushing a cleaning cart. He wasn't looking at the floor. He walked through the lobby as if he had owned it his entire life. Because now, he did. Jessica laughed out loud. "What is this? A costume party? Did someone rent you a suit?" No one laughed with her. She looked around, confused. Arthur Bennett stepped forward. "In accordance with federal corporate law, Carter International Holdings has acquired 82% of Harrison Global. Effective immediately, Mr. Ethan Carter is the new chairman and chief executive officer." The lobby froze. Coffee cups slipped from trembling hands. Phones stopped recording. Someone whispered, "The janitor owns the company?" Jessica shook her head violently. "No. No, that's impossible. My father owns this company." Arthur calmly handed her a folder. He did. Richard Harrison stormed into the lobby. His face burned with anger. "Ethan, you planned this." Ethan looked at him calmly. "No. You planned this. 25 years ago." Richard's confidence disappeared. The lobby became so quiet. You could hear the air conditioning. Ethan continued. "You stole my grandfather's company. You destroyed innocent families. You forged documents. You lied. And then you built your empire using stolen money." Richard shouted, "Prove it." Arthur smiled. "I'd be happy to." The lawyers placed dozens of boxes on the marble floor. Financial records, bank transfers, original contracts, witness statements, private investigation reports. Everything Richard had spent 25 years hiding was now sitting in front of every employee. Arthur quietly said, "We've been collecting evidence for 2 decades." Richard's hands began shaking. For the first time in his life, he had nowhere to run. Police officers entered the building. Not 1. Not 2. 8. The lead detective approached Richard. "Richard Harrison, you are under arrest for fraud, corporate theft, money laundering, and conspiracy." Jessica screamed. "Do something." Richard looked at Ethan. his eyes filled with desperation. "Please. Let's talk. We can make a deal." Ethan looked directly at him, then quietly replied, "My grandfather tried." You laughed at him. The officers placed handcuffs on Richard. As they led him away, every employee watched silently. The man they once believed was untouchable didn't even look powerful anymore. He looked small, very small. Jessica rushed toward Ethan. "This isn't fair. You ruined my family." Ethan looked at her for several seconds, then asked one simple question. "Did I? Or did your father's choices finally catch up with him?" Jessica couldn't answer. She lowered her head. Then anger returned. "So what now? Are you going to fire me? Humiliate me? Make everyone laugh?" Ethan slowly smiled. "No. I'm going to do something much harder. I'm going to give you a choice." The entire lobby watched. "You can leave today, with enough money to start over honestly. Or you can stay. But if you stay, you'll begin exactly where I began." Jessica frowned. "What does that mean?" Ethan looked toward the cleaning cart still standing in the corner. "It means tomorrow morning, you report as a janitor." The entire lobby gasped. Jessica's face turned red. "You can't be serious." Ethan calmly answered, "I cleaned these floors for 6 years. You always believed the job was beneath you. So prove you were wrong. No one will insult you. No one will laugh. But you will finally understand that dignity doesn't come from a job. It comes from character." Jessica stood speechless. For the first time in her life, no amount of money could buy her way out. Harrison Global had changed completely. Employees smiled. Security guards were respected. Janitors received the same healthcare benefits as executives. Every employee's child received an education scholarship. Anonymous complaint boxes replaced fear. Promotions were based on effort, not family names. Frank, the old security guard, became head of employee relations. When Ethan handed him the promotion letter, Frank's eyes filled with tears. "I never thought anyone would notice an old man like me." Ethan smiled. "I noticed." Jessica accepted the janitor position, not because she wanted to, because she had nowhere else to go. The first week was miserable. Her back hurt. Her hands blistered. People accidentally ignored her, exactly as they had ignored Ethan. For the first time, she understood. One afternoon, a young intern spilled coffee on the floor. Jessica instinctively knelt to clean it. The intern immediately stopped her. "I'm so sorry. I'll clean it myself." Jessica froze. No one had ever apologized to her before. That night, she cried alone, not because she had lost her wealth, but because she finally understood how much pain she had caused others. Months later, she walked into Ethan's office. Without makeup, without expensive jewelry, without arrogance, she quietly placed a handwritten letter on his desk. "I'm sorry. I know I can't erase what I did. But I'll spend the rest of my life trying to become someone my younger self would never recognize." Ethan read the letter, then smiled. "My grandfather once told me, the greatest revenge isn't destroying someone's future. It's giving them the chance to become better than their past." That evening, Ethan returned to the old shelter. The children ran toward him just as they always had. "Mr. Ethan," the little girl smiled. "Did you bring strawberry cookies?" He laughed. "I brought 2 boxes this time." As the children celebrated, Arthur quietly approached. "There's one final document your grandfather left." Ethan opened it. Inside was a short handwritten note. "If you're reading this, it means you chose kindness over hatred. Never measure success by the number of people beneath you. Measure it by the number of people you lift up. If you remember that, then our family never truly lost anything." Ethan looked up at the laughing children. A gentle smile crossed his face. He finally understood. The greatest victory wasn't buying back the company. It wasn't seeing Richard arrested. It wasn't watching Jessica change. It was proving that no amount of cruelty could make a good man stop being good. And sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't becoming richer than your enemies. It's becoming someone They will spend the rest of their lives wishing they had never underestimated.